With the T20I series between India and South Africa now having come to a bit of a damn squib of a conclusion, there's still quite a few burning questions that remain to be addressed, especially considering that this is the year of the T20I World Cup. And of course, one of the biggest questions that has been talked about ad nauseum at this point is the form of Rishabh Pant. Now, obviously, when it comes to India's wicketkeeper batsman dilemma, there have been more than a few people who have said that Pant is probably not the right person to be playing in T20 cricket or as the first choice wicketkeeper batsman right now. In fact, if we take a look at his stats in T20I cricket, you'd understand why exactly it is that people have this opinion of Pant. In 48 T20I matches, he scored 741 runs at an average of 23.15 and a strike rate of just 123.91. It is these two numbers perhaps that draw the most brickbats for the youngster, because despite the fact that everyone knows that he can score plenty of runs and at a very quick pace, he's actually underwhelmed in that regard when it comes to the international arena. And in fact, his recent run of form in T20I, stretching back, you would argue to, in fact, his IPL showings as well, which would of course include T20s, not just internationals, have meant that there have been a lot of people who have said that maybe it's time to at least temporarily drop Pant from the squad. And well, if you were thinking that he would come out all guns blazing in the South Africa series, especially considering he had the additional responsibility of leading the team, well, you would actually sadly be wrong, because again, a quick look at his numbers for this particular series don't paint a very pretty picture. In the 5 matches he played, and of course it is worth noting that he did bat in all 5 innings, but the last T20I was a rained out affair where I think he only faced the ball. That's still not a good look considering he scored 58 runs, average of 14.5, and striking it at a strike rate just above 100, 105.45 to be exact. What's more, and something that's not necessarily reflected in these numbers, is the fact that Rishabh Pant was found lacking with one particular strategy being used against him by South Africa's quicks. They would bowl short and wide outside off stump, forcing him to fetch the ball from wide, and more often than not, he would hole out with the ball either ballooning up or him completing a shot that was nowhere near good enough and oftentimes premeditated. Naturally, especially considering the fact that this other wicketkeeper batsman who bats lower down the order, a certain Dinesh Karthik, has been in pretty good form through this series, it's further raised question marks as to whether or not Rishabh Pant should be a certainty or a guaranteed starter in that T20I side or not. However, the good news, if you're Rishabh Pant, and of course if you're a Rishabh Pant fan, is that head coach Rahul Dravid doesn't necessarily seem to be thinking that way, at least not yet. Because speaking after yesterday's match in the post-match press conference, he pointed out some very interesting things, not just about Rishabh Pant, the batsman, but also Rishabh Pant, the captain. First, let's take a look at what he said about his batting approach. In fact, he did say that, he was asking all the batsmen, not just Pant, but also the middle order players, the openers, to be more aggressive from ball 1, and that more often than not, that is an approach that when it comes off looks great, but when it doesn't come off can often leave. When it doesn't work, it can sometimes see batsmen get out cheaply. And that is something that he mentioned about Pant. But perhaps the most noteworthy thing he said was that he knows what he does with the power that he has, and that he is a very big part of our plans going ahead in the next few months. He also did say that, Pant in the recently concluded IPL, he might not have scored as many runs, but his strike rate, which if I remind you was at around the 150 mark, was very, very good, and exactly what Dravid expects him to do in the Indian team setup as well. So at least as far as Pant, the batsman, is concerned, he doesn't seem overly worried. In fact, he did say that, and this is something that he mentioned for the entire team, is that they're not going to look to discard players very quickly. They are going to give them something of a long run, and they are going to give them plenty of chances to prove their worth, because as he says, anyone who's actually got that call up has earned that call up, and therefore we have to give them some time to justify their spot, and that's exactly what the plan is with Rishabh as well. What's more, he also mentioned that one of the key factors or one of the important factors when it comes to sticking with Rishabh Pant is that he's a left-hander who can hit hard in the middle overs. Of course, if you go over India's batting lineup, even the first choice 11 which we expect will be picked in that T20 World Cup, you would notice that there's a stark paucity of left-hand batsmen. In fact, alongside Pant, arguably the only proper left-hand batsman in this series was, of course, Akshar Patel. And of course, going forward will be a Ravi Jadeja who will take Akshar's place. So, not that many left-handers, and that perhaps is also one more reason why Pant is getting a slightly longer rope than most. Of course, he's an X-factor player, but there's also the fact that he adds a different dimension to India's batting. It's largely a right-handed batting lineup, and he adds something a little different, at least in that regard. Then there's, of course, the matter of Pant's captaincy, which, as we know, came under a lot of scanner, particularly in the first two games, which India lost pretty badly, all things considered. But Rahul Dravid did say very clearly that first off, and beside this quote that I have on screen here, which you can read, he also said the captaincy, it's not fair to judge just on wins and losses, but it's also worth noting the fact that Pant, who is captaining at international level for the first time, brought India from 2-0 down to 2-all up and actually took the final match of the series to a decider, and that in itself is something that is worth giving him credit for, because he may have had a slow start, but he figured things out, and the batsmen and bowlers also started firing more, and that helped him considerably to turn the series around, because after the first two games a lot of people had written off the series. In fact, there was also talk of this series ending either 4-1 or even potentially a 5-0 whitewash. That obviously didn't happen. In fact, were it not for rain, who really knows, India might just have completed quite a good turnaround. But perhaps the more key thing which Dravid said about Pant, the skipper, is that he's a young captain and he is learning all the time. It is perhaps too early to judge him. Now, of course, it is worth noting that Pant doesn't really have a lot of captaincy experience, whether you look at even international or domestic level. He did captain the Delhi Capitals from 2021 and 2022, of course, but that's only 2 seasons of IPL captaincy, and his record there has been mixed at best. This was the first time that he was getting a chance to captain India, and in fact, the only reason he got that chance was because KL Rahul ended up suffering from a groin injury and had to pull out of the tour in the last minute. Otherwise, Pant was only the designated vice captain, and who knows, without the burden of captaincy there, he might just have actually flourished more if focusing just on his batting and keeping, both of which have sometimes come under the scanner in recent times. But he didn't get a chance to do that, and despite the fact that they lost the first 2 games under his leadership, he absolutely did turn things around. And it's always fair to say, and it's something that I believe, that if you can criticize people when they go wrong, there's nothing wrong with pointing out where it is that they went right. And with Pant, he did in fact manage to get things right in the second part of the tour more often than not. Because as you can see, it's not just the fact that his players were performing, but the fact that Pant was picking and choosing when to employ his bowlers and things like that, that would have also contributed to India winning 2 games on the trot. So there is that also to take into consideration. But many people thought, us included, that this would be something of an addition for Pant going forward, because even considering that KL Rahul is seen as the next skipper after Rohit, the fact is that even KL Rahul probably wouldn't give you a long time in captaincy, considering he's close to his 30s. Pant, on the other hand, just 24 years old, and is someone who's clearly been earmarked as a long-term prospect. The fact that he lost the first 2 games against South Africa and then managed to pull things back and take it to a decider has little reflection on how it is they see his captaincy prospects in the future. In fact, as Dravid himself says, it's too early to judge Pant. So the good news, if you're a Rishabh Pant and you're a Rishabh Pant fan, is that they've neither given up on him as a wicketkeeper batsman nor as a future captain. And that is an interesting approach, which of course, we have noted on the past in many of our discussions on this very channel, that the previous setup, the previous coaching team, the previous team management had this tendency of making changes at a very fast rate. Dravid and co, on the other hand, have stressed being patient with their players, have stressed giving players a longer rope, and have more importantly stressed the importance of backing the players to come good, even though sometimes the numbers or the stats might not be that encouraging. There is a level of faith, and in fact that is reflected in the fact that this particular team, if you remember, there were a lot of calls for, you have to try Umran Malik, you have to try an Arshdeep, you have to try out this player. The fact is, this particular squad went unchanged. They played unchanged 11s throughout the 5-match series. Not once did they change their lineup, and that consistency did actually bear fruit, because remember, the first 2 games, the likes of Bhuvneshwar and Harshal didn't do very well. Then they turned things around and suddenly they looked like match winners for India. So I guess to wind up this video, the simple fact is that Pant, they've not lost faith in him yet. And in fact, Rahul Dravid has come out and very publicly and glowingly endorsed Pant, his abilities and what he can do. And he's also stressed the need for patience with Pant. And the fact is that he said very clearly that he remains an integral part of the Indian lineup. Now, what is it that you think about this? Do you think that Pant should be dropped in favor of maybe a DK? Do you think Pant needs to maybe work on his weaknesses before he's actually made a permanent part of the T20I lineup? Do let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you all for joining us. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like the video, leave us a few comments, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you once again for joining us. As always, I've been Shane Rice. I'll see you all very, very soon. Bye-bye.